Hi, everyone. Welcome back to dinanddaf. This is Elana Stein Hain. This week, we are going to talk about the transgression of me'ilah, of misappropriation of sacred items. So, the sin of me'ilah is mentioned a few times in the Gemara in Zevachim this week, notably, for instance, on Zevachim Samach Vav Amud Bet 66b, about the question of whether me'ilah still applies to a korban hatat that has become invalid and will not be able to be eaten by Kohanim. But the reason why I want to take a step back is because I actually think that the whole conversation about Me'ilah sheds a lot of light on what it means to have an entire realm that is hekdesh, that is sacred. And so let's take a look at some of the psukim about Me'ilah in order to start to understand what it is. So we start with Vayikra, chapter Hey, Psukim Yudal to Tet Zayin. V'daber Adonai el Moshe lemor, God speaks to Moshe, saying, Nefesh kitim ol ma'al v'chat'a b'shgaga mikodshei Adonai. If a person commits a trespass and accidentally does something sinful regarding God's sacred things, ve'hevi et ashamo l'Adonai, they bring their asham, and remember we said korban asham a few weeks ago in the shear that we gave is that a korban hasham actually stands for the word recompense, right? One brings one's recompense or compensatory offering to God. Ayel tamim min hatzon. It should be a ram. Be'erkecha kesef shkalim b'shekel hakodesh la'asham. And it's supposed to cost a certain amount of money. Ve'et asher chata min hakodesh, and not only that, but whatever it is that they trespassed from the consecrated items, yishalem, they have to repay to the temple treasury. Ve'et chamishito yosef alav, and they add a fifth portion of it, meaning another 25%. They pay 5/4 of what it was worth. V'natan oto lekohen, and he's going to give it to the kohen. V'hakohen yechaper alav ba'el ha'asham v'nislach lo, and the kohen will atone using that ram of the asham. So what exactly does tim'ol ma'al mean? So first of all, the really significant biblical dictionary known as Brown Driver Briggs, because of the three authors who authored it, says that ma'al means acted unfaithfully or treacherously. It's actually related to the Arabic, it seems, for backbiting or fraud. So, oh ma'al. So, what exactly are we talking about here? A person did what with a sacred item? So, when you look at the Mishnayot in Masechet Me'ilah, which God willing, one day we'll learn that stuff too, we see beginnings of a definition as to what a person is actually doing here that's problematic. We're in chapter 5 of the Mishnayot of tractate Me'ilah. If somebody gets a pruta's worth of a hana'ah, of enjoyment, use, pleasure, benefit, I think benefit is the best word, right? If somebody benefits a pruta's worth from something that is consecrated, afal pi shelo pagam, even though they didn't do any damage to the item, ma'al. They have done me'ilah. They have trespassed. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. So it makes it sound like the problem is hana'ah min ha'hekdesh. The problem is getting benefit, deriving personal benefit from something that is sacred. Okay. And it has to be a pruta's worth. The Chachamim say, Kol davar sheyesh bo pigam lo ma'al ad sheyifgo. And the rabbis say, no, 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 no. If it's something that can be damaged, you didn't do any me'ilah until you've also done some sort of damage. Now, lest you think damage means you tore it or something, or you broke it. That's not what we mean. We mean wear and tear. V'chol davar she'ein bo pigam. But if it's something that does not get wear and tear, then kevan shenehena ma'al. So long as one has benefited, derived benefit, they've done me'ilah. Now, let me ask a question. What is this category of pagam, that you had to have done some sort of wear and tear on the object. Is that just about deriving benefit, and it's somehow part of how we describe what it means to derive benefit? Or is actually me'ila something about detracting from the item itself, maybe a kind of gezel, maybe a kind of stealing, right? So it turns out, let's just look at the rest of the Mishnah that'll give us a sense of what's something that would get wear and tear and what's something that wouldn't. Ketzad, how so? Natna katla b'tzavara. If a woman put a gold chain that had been consecrated to the temple, let's say it was going to be used to pay for temple repairs, something like that, or tabat biyada, or a ring on her finger, shatata b'kos shel zahav, or she drank from a consecrated gold cup. Kevan shenaneit mahala, once she got hana'ah, once she derived benefit, she has performed me'ila. She has trespassed. But what about a different example? Lavash b'chaluk, if a man put on a jacket, kisa b'talit, or covered himself in a some sort of garment. Any of these are hekdesh, again, probably given to the mikdash as a way of paying for temple repairs. Bika bikardom, or if he used an axe that was consecrated and used it to chop wood, lo ma'al achif gom. That person he has not done me'ila until he has been pogem, he's done some sort of wear and tear on the object. So I just want us to appreciate these two different directions of, is it about hana'ah or is it about wear and tear on the object, which starts to move us in the direction of, is the problem with me'ila getting benefit from something that's hekdesh, meaning essentially we're talking about here iser veheter, we're talking about forbidden things and permitted things. And what you've done is you've taken something that's asur b'hana'ah that isn't supposed to be used for your benefit, and now you're using it for your benefit. Or is the problem here that what you're doing is you are putting wear and tear on something that doesn't belong to you, right? Essentially, a kind more in the realm of dine mamonot, right? The laws of money, and it's a type of gezel, or in that kind of direction. Now, even if you don't want to read the distinction between hana'ah and pigima that way, when we look at a mishnah later in that same parak, you get this sense of hana'ah versus something else. So the Mishnah suggests, it gives us the following scenario. Natal Evan Okora Shel Hekdesh Hareze Lo Ma'al. If somebody took a stone or a beam that was consecrated, they have not done me'ila. Now, the Gemara is going to say that the person we're talking about taking things is the temple treasurer. And because this stuff is already in his domain, there's no me'ila. But nitana l'chavero, if he gave it to somebody else, then hu ma'al v'chavero lo ma'al. Then he has done me'ila. The other person hasn't, but he has done me'ila. Meaning, what's the problem? He took it from the reshut of hekdesh. He took it from the domain of the sacred, consecrated, and put it in a new reshut, a new domain, meaning he stole it by giving it and changing ownership, changing domain, taking it from the reshut of kachim to the reshut of kulin. Well, there you have it. It looks like what we're talking about here is gezel. That's mi'ila. And then the next line in the Mishnah goes back to hana. Bina'a betoch beito. Let's say the person, instead of just taking it, or instead of giving it to somebody else, they used it somehow in the structure of their home, probably not in a permanent kind of way. There's no me'ila ad sheyadur tachtea b'shaveh pruta, until they live under it the amount that is a pruta's worth, meaning they get the hana, the benefit of a pruta's worth. So it shouldn't surprise you to know that generally when we look at the Achronim, when we look at the later commentators, we find that there are two basic understandings of Me'ila. One understanding of Me'ilah is that it's really about gezel. It's really about stealing. Something belongs to Hekdesh. It doesn't belong to you. You have no right to take it out of Hekdesh. You have no right to damage it, right? That is gezel of sorts. Now, this explanation is fascinating because what it's really trying to say is don't excuse yourself to say, well, look, it's a sin that has no victims, meaning, okay, it belonged to Hekdesh, but it didn't belong to another person. It has no victims. We say, no, 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 no. There's such a thing as the temple treasury, that which was set aside for Avodat Hashem, for worship of God, and there's such a thing as stealing from it. And we're trying to tell you, no, it's not a victimless crime. It's highly problematic. What you've basically done is you've undermined what it means to have stuff set aside for Avodat Hashem. The other way that people look at this, and the Or Sameach, the Rav Meir Simcha Cohen of Dvinsk, I want to say, the Or Sameach, he understands it as no, it's a problem of Isser v'Heter. It's a problem of what's forbidden and what's permitted. What you've done is you've taken hana'ah, you've gotten benefit from something that you are not allowed to benefit from. In other words, it's not about stealing, it's actually about, don't you realize that the source of Kedusha means designated, it means separated. The source of Kedusha is that you don't own it. You don't own everything. And the idea that you would go to something that represents so clearly what Kedusha is all about and think, oh no, I do own it. I can use it however I want. That is highly problematic. Judaism rests on a distinction between Kodesh and Chol. There are things that are off limits to you, and there are things that are within the limits for you. This is one of those things that's off limits to you. So these two different ways of thinking about what Me'ilah is pushes you in different directions in terms of thinking about what the whole uh, edifice of the Mikdash and the whole institution of having korbanot and things like that, what it actually is supposed to do to the religious psyche. So I want to look at a few places that push in different directions. Is it more about stealing, gezel? Is it more about the problem of deriving benefit, hana? Meaning, is it more about don't look at this as a victimless crime? There's such a thing as a whole financial aspect of our economy that's supposed to go to Kedusha, and you can't ruin that, you can't steal from that, and that's stealing just as much. Or do we look at this as you have to understand Kedusha means it's not yours, and when you try to use it, that is actually an undermining of the concept of Kedusha. So in terms of stealing, thinking about it as stealing, you might want to look actually later in Perek Hey of Vayikra that also uses the term Me'ilah, and it specifically uses the term Me'ilah in context of lying about money that you have that somebody else is claiming from you. And it goes like this. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, God spoke to Moshe saying, Nefesh ki techata umala ma'al ba'adonai, a person who sins and does Me'ilah, trespasses God. How so? V'chichesh ba'amito, that person denied their fellow, b'pikadon, the deposit that the person said, I deposited this thing from you in your house when I was away, and I came back and you're not giving it back to me. And what does the defendant do? The defendant swears, no, 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 I don't know what you're talking about. I gave it back, right? Or maybe I never had in the first place, but I gave it back, right? And even takes a shvua and even takes an oath on it, right? But really what they're doing is they're lying. Oh, bitsumet yad, or somebody says, you did something, you actually took something of mine. Oh, begezel, right? You stole from me. Oh, ashaket amito, or you didn't pay me my wages. Oh, matzah aveda, or uh the person found a lost item, v'chichesh ba, and lied about it, v'nishba al sheker, and swore falsely, alachat mikol asher yaseh adam lachato behena, any of those things. What's going to happen? Same thing, there's going to be a korban asham that has to be given, and same thing, they're going to have to pay 5/4 of what they owed. But the point is here, it's also called me'ila. So when I look at this, I say, oh, well, this is interesting because this really is literally stealing, meaning somebody claims it's literally stealing from another human being. Somebody claims you found something of theirs. Somebody claims you haven't paid your wages. Somebody claims you still have their deposit. Somebody claims you stole from them. All of those things, that's literal stealing from another human being. So maybe the term me'ila used in both places tells me that what we're talking about is stealing, right? So that's something that goes in another direction. Another example, actually, from Tanakh is that King Yoash in Melachim Bet in chapter 12 basically sees that there aren't repairs being made to the Beit HaMikdash, and Vayomer Yehoash el Kohanim, Yoash says to the Kohanim, to the priests, Kol kesef HaKodashim asher yuva Beit Adonai kesef uver ish kesef nafshot erko kol kesef asher ya'aleh alev ish lavi Beit Adonai. He said to everybody, by the way, when the money comes in, this is money that is supposed to be money that's brought for the mikdash. So what's going to happen is yichu lahem kohanim ish me'et makaro v'hem yichasku et bedek habayit v'chol asher yimatzeh sham badek. He says, I want you to take money from, whoever your benefactor is. I want you to use that money to do bedek, to make repairs on the Beit HaMikdash. Vayhi b'shnat esrim v'shalosh shana lemelech Yoash, and it was the 23rd year of his kingship. Lo chizku ka'kohanim et bedek habayit. He saw that the priests were not making repairs on the mikdash, on the temple. Vayikra hamelech Yoash lehoyada kohen v'lekohanim. So Yoash summons Yehoyada, the priests, and to the other priests. Vayomer lehem, he says, Maduin chem mechaskim et bedek habayit. How come you guys are not making the repairs you're supposed to on the mikdash? I don't want you taking the money for yourselves from your benefactors. I want you giving it to the Beit HaMikdash for Bedek HaBayit. Meaning this is another example where it seems clear you are taking from the Mikdash. This is money that is supposed to be for the repairs of the Mikdash. Now this sounds like very Dinei Mamonot. This sounds very much like financial issues. The temple needs repairing. You can't take the money that is meant for the temple, right? And the truth is, there's also the Balei HaTosfot say it very clearly also, and I'm going to give an example. I'm not even going to read the Gemara that goes with it just for lack of time, but I put it on there as number 8 for anybody who wants to take a look. Tosfot say, let me tell you what me'ila is. Ein me'ila ela shinoi. Me'ila is a change. That's a quote from the Gemara in Me'ila that I put in number 8. It says, Perush mikodesh l'chol, meaning a change from sacred to mundane, meaning al mirishut l'rishut. It moved from one domain, meaning one financial domain, to another. Mirishut kodesh, from the domain of the sacred, l'rishut chol, to the domain of the mundane. Okay? Meaning the problem here is hotza'ah mirishut l'rishut. Okay? Meaning that's the issue. We don't want it moving from one domain to another. Now, it's interesting. I should just say parenthetically, you could say that how would you even define gezel? How would you even define stealing, right? So one way to define stealing would be hotza'ah mirishut l'rishut, moving from one domain to another domain. I would also wonder, what if you were just pugim, right? What if you were just, did some wear and tear on that? Would you also call that gezel, or would we put that in the category of hana'ah? But we'll leave that for another time. Okay. What about the side that says that the issue is benefiting from Kodesh or betraying Kodesh? Well, it's interesting to see that the Rambam, the way that he describes an example that seems to be taking money that was promised to the Mikdash and giving it to someone else, instead of describing that as hotza'ah mereshut l'reshut, that you're moving it from one domain to another, meaning you're doing gezel, he describes it as the problem of hana'ah, the problem of benefit. Let's take a look. Natal pruta shel hekdesh unetana levalan. If somebody takes a pruta of consecrated money and gives it to the bath attendant, afal pi shelo rachatz, even though they didn't wash themselves, ma'al, they still did me'ila. Why? Sharei nehnet bioto rochetz b'chol et shirtzeh. Because there's hana'ah that you can there's benefit in that you can bathe whenever you want. Now, notice he could have said the reason why it's Me'ila is because you gave it from one reshut, the reshut of Kudshim, into another reshut, namely the reshut of the bathhouse. You stole it, but that's not the way that he describes it. He describes it as our issue is you are getting hana. Now, even returning to what we said before, that comparing the me'ila of kudshim to the me'ila that's used to describe lying about money that you owe to somebody else, where we said, oh, makes it sound like it's stealing. Actually, maybe the term me'ila that's used even in that case, where you're stealing from somebody else, isn't actually about stealing, but is actually about betraying Kodesh. Let's see what we mean. So the Sifra says, Rabbi Akiva, Omer ma Talmud lomaru ma'ala ma'al b'Hashem. Rabbi Akiva says, why in a case where you're swearing falsely not to deny the claim of money that somebody else has over you, why are you calling that a trespass against God? It's a trespass against another person. Says, we'll tell you why. If we were talking about a situation of borrowed money or doing business, you wouldn't do either of those things, alone or doing business, without a contract and witnesses, right? And therefore, lefichach bisman shehu makrish. So in that kind of situation, when you deny that you owe somebody money or say that you paid them, you deny that you owe somebody money for what you bought, then makrish be'edim u'shtar. What are you doing? You are denying the witnesses and the contract. But aval hamafkid etzel chavero. But when somebody places a deposit in their friend's home, which is the example, right? Prime example of what was called me'ila in later in Parakeh in Vayikra, when you denied somebody else's money, when somebody gives a deposit, they don't want anybody else to know. Except for the third among them. Who's the third? God. Only God knows that I gave you the deposit. So bisman shu makrish. So when you deny the deposit, makrish b'shlishi shivanehim, you're denying God. Meaning the problem here is not just that you're stealing. The problem is that you are denying God's awareness of what happened here. Now you could also go a different direction, which is you could say the problem is you're going to take a shvuah using God's name and you're lying. That itself is a problem. You're, misusing God's name. But the point here is that it's a different way of looking. Instead of looking at it as just stealing, in addition to stealing, what you are doing is you are denying God. You are betraying something kadosh. Now, I want to end with the end of the Rambam's halachot of Hilchot Me'ila. At the very end, he says something absolutely fascinating, which really shows that he looks at Me'ila as the problem is not gezel, stealing. The problem is betraying Kodesh or treating Kodesh as though it's whole, right? Treating something sanctified as though it's mundane or treating it like it belongs to you when it shouldn't belong to you, right? So he says as follows, and it's really interesting to see this, given that he is the arch rationalist. ראוי לאדם להתבונן במשפטי התורה הקדושה ולדע סוף עניינם כפי כוחו. It is worthy for a person to look into the laws of our holy Torah and to know, the most profound depths, to understand their motivation, to understand the why of them. V'davar shelo yimtza lo ta'am, but something that a person cannot find a reason for. V'lo yeda lo ilah, and they just can't figure out what the goal of that mitzvah is. Al yehi kal be'enav. That should not make that mitzvah any lighter in that person's eyes. V'lo yaharos la'alot el Hashem pen yifrotzbo. And they should not, using language from running up to Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, you should not try to be destructive and, go up to Hashem, so to speak, lest, you be punished for it. V'lo tehei machshavto bo kemachshavto b'shar divrei hachol. And this is unbelievable, the metaphor that he's offering, or the analogy that he's offering. He says, you shouldn't think about that mitzvah the way you would think about other mundane matters. Why? Bo u're'eh kama hechmira Torah b'me'ilah. Look at how severe the Torah was about the problem of trespass. Uma im etzim va'avanim va'afar va'efer. If inanimate objects, wood, stone, dirt, ash, keva shenikra shem adon ha'olam alehem, bidvarim bilvad nitkadshu. Once God's name is upon them, even with words alone, they have become sacred. V'chol hanoheg bahen minhag chol ma'alba. And anybody who uses them in a manner, treats them in a manner of chol, of mundane, has trespassed. V'afilu haya shogeg tzarech kapara. And even if you did it unwittingly, it needs atonement. Kal v'chomer, how much more so? Lemitzvot, when it comes to commandments, shachak lanu akadosh baruch hu, that God engraved for us, shelo yiv'at ha'adam bahem, a person should not kick them over, mipnei shelo yedat ta'aman, because they don't know their reasons. In other words, what he's trying to do is he's trying to protect the concept of a chok, the concept of a law that we don't know the reason for. And it's incredible, as the arch rationalist that he is, he's basically saying the same way Me'ilah is treating Kodesh like Chol, looking at mitzvot that you can't understand with your rational mind and explain the way you would need to explain everything that is Chol, does not give you the option of throwing it away, which is what you would do in the realm of the mundane. Pretty remarkable analogy. He goes on, but I'll leave you to read it on your own. So that's Me'ilah, the world of Kachim, giving you a sense that there is actually a whole financial institution around Avodat Hashem, and that financial institution is meant to be proprietary. Me'ilah also, there is such a thing as things that are off limits to us, kiddushim. And to be able to maintain that sense that they're off limits to us, that is part of what having a concrete world of kachim can do for us. Thanks, everyone. Looking forward to learning with you next time.